Hello guys, so here in YouTube, you probably know me as the guy who uploads the heart-to-hearts of, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 for the Wii on YouTube, right? Because that's basically all I've done. But I've been wanting to talk about my favorite game of all time for a long time, but I just never knew how to word it. But I figured this is the right time, so I just have to get it out, right? So let's just talk about it, right? Xenoblade Chronicles. How do I even begin, right? This is just an amazing game. This is a game that is often considered a masterpiece. But before we get into that, let's just say this game has become the favorite of many within like the first week or the first playthrough, and they just keep playing over and over again. And many have played this game since like 2012, 2013, and to this day they still love the game. There aren't any games that receive this level of respect that is so consistent other than masterpieces, which is exactly what this game is. Of course, that title is gonna be challenged, because when you have the reputation of a masterpiece, you are basically required to live up to that title, and rightfully so. And of course, not everybody's gonna agree. After a few sequels that it now has, we finally have games to compare it to that it's completely fair, because they're the sequels and they improve in some aspects. So of course, not everybody's gonna feel that this game is the best, or not everybody's gonna feel like this game is a masterpiece. But don't worry, let me explain why Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii is in fact a masterpiece. I will talk about the Definitive Edition in the future, but in this video I will try to mostly focus on the Wii version, and many things are gonna apply anyways. I will also talk about the 3DS version here and there. Okay, so I'm Mr. Square here. Now let's get to it. Xenoblade was a game that came in the right time, 2011 to be exact, because you see, in 2010 the Wii had a plethora of games. It was a great year for Nintendo, and then the next year happened and we were sort of dry. It was kind of a bad era at the time. I wasn't even into Nintendo like that then, so yeah, it wasn't a very good time. So there was this thing called Operation Rainfall, which was to get 3 RPGs that were only in Japan that were supposed to be localized. Some of them who were already localized in Europe. Nintendo of North America basically said no. So there was just this huge movement, and finally in 2012 we got Xenoblade here, and it instantly gained like amazing reviews. It got claimed as the best game of the generation. Just crazy. I mean, people were just asking for games just because they wanted something to play, and they never expected that one of them would be an actual masterpiece. Xenoblade has had a few sequels, it has had Shoken Smash, and many ports. Sadly though, at the time, while it was well received critical wise, the sales didn't exactly reflect it, but there was always hope. As I said before, Xenoblade has had a couple of sequels, and while they weren't poorly received by any means, they definitely caused a division, a split in the fanbase. The games are by no means bad games, but like many other games in the industry, they lack the ability to earn the universal respect the first one gets, like every average game. I think saying this is just a matter of opinion is not a good thing. I feel like you're undermining the effort that is being put into these games. Creating fun doesn't come out of nowhere. You have to work hard for it. You have to work hard to entertain people, because the fun of the people has to be earned. Okay, enough beating around the bush. Why is Xenoblade a masterpiece? Basically, because it has everything. I know, it's a very broad statement, I know, but listen. There are many games that you love the gameplay, the soundtrack, and the art style, but the story is terrible, it is too short, it has, some bad DLC practices. Like, there's always something, right, that just doesn't give it, that prevents the game from getting the level of respect that you will like. But even if you love it, you understand why it doesn't get it. Let me give a few examples. Persona 3 is considered better than 4 and 5 by many because of its narrative and its characters, But even the fans of the game itself feel that the gameplay and the dungeons leave a lot to be desired. This aspect of the game is certainly not the worst thing ever, but you hardly ever see people even wanting talking about it because there really isn't much to praise in that regard. This being the case, many people prefer the sequels of the series since they just do it better, which is why others will prefer to just play it regard. But let's just go back to Xenoblade. Xenoblade X, it's admired for its combat, its movement, its world, its customization, but it's often criticized by its UI, sometimes its music, the story, no tutorials, no towns, underwhelming characters, and just a lot of filler in the game. Xenoblade 2 is praised by its characters for some reason, its combat, its world, its more colorful and lighthearted nature, but it's also criticized by its art style. I mean, you heard this to no end, its poor pacing, the story, its protagonist, the gacha system. I think you get the point, right? What segregates people's opinion is not really simply a matter of taste, but really is the lack of balance and consistency in quality all across the board. You have like a couple of 90s and 8s in some areas, but then you have 4s and 3s in the rest of the areas, then this is where taste comes into play, which, eventually separates people in the perspective of a game. This is why the rest of the games are not masterpieces. This is what separates the masterpieces from the rest of the games. So what makes Xenoblade a better game? Well, it is the fact that it doesn't underdeliver in any front. The story, great. Soundtrack, amazing. Everybody loves the soundtrack. Combat, unique, fun, and engaging. Characters, likable, memorable, and charismatic. From heroes to side characters to the villains. Dialogue, impactful, memorable, just absolutely mwah. Content, plenty of it. Memes, absolutely. Visuals, I think we are gonna start with what would be our first outlier right here. So, but that's kind of the question, right? I don't think it's just a given that the visuals are bad. So let's just talk about it, right? So even for a Wii game, the graphics are not very good. Let's just be real. Let's just not mince words. The graphics are not amazing. They leave a lot to be desired, and honestly, they could be better. Even for a Wii game, there are other games on the Wii that just look better, in my opinion, and I think in other people's opinion. I think this is just a fact. Okay, let's just continue. Okay, but the game has so much to offer in other ways. So I assume that one area of the game had to suffer, and undoubtedly that was the graphics. But how does Xenoblade makes it up for you? Well, it's simple. It makes it up in artistic direction. Every environment, even with its limited graphics, it uses them to the greatest extent. The world of Xenoblade is beautiful. You're not gonna tell me the bionics, the mechanics, the character designs, the environments, the flora. You're not gonna tell me any of that looks ugly. They choose the right colors for many of the places. It just creates a great feeling where you're walking down Satoru's Mash. The game just has really good views, and this is coming from a Wii game. A Wii game that doesn't even have good graphics for the standards of the Wii. So while yes, the visuals could for many be like the weakest aspect of the game, I feel that it is also not a bad aspect at all. I feel that it sells itself for a lot of value. So yes, the artistic direction is really solid. Also, something to say about the 3DS version, you can unlock the 3D models of the characters. That's really cool. And I also think the art style that is a little like gritty, but it also has like that slight colorfulness. I really like it. Okay, so I know that I could have started with this, since it's, well, the most important aspect of a game. Yes, even with an RPG. If it's fun, that's what matters the most. And the combat, it's great. I'm unsure why, but many people don't seem to like it very much. But I love it, and many people that I know grow to love it as well. They call it slow and other stuff. Being unable to control the party seems like a huge deal breaker for many. I mean, in other games, party members are basically just extra turns. Here, they actually have a role of their own. So here's how it works. There is no battle screen. You see an enemy, you can fight it right there and then. You pull out your weapon and you fight. Below you have a selection of what is called art, which you can select with the D-pad. This applies for all 3 controllers, Classic, Wiimote, with Nunchuck, and even the 3DS. And then you move and select set art and attack with it. Each art has its own attributes and bonus damages, so of course your goal is to move around and find your way to deal the most damage to said enemies. This is best captured with the signature \. Of course, you are not alone. You have your party members, each which fills a specific role. Whether it's being a tank, a mage, support, whatever, all are very unique from each other. You want to tank hits? Pick Ryan. You want to do support and damage over time? Pick Ricky. You want to play like a traditional RPG, basically the mage in the party? Pick Melia. The AI in the game is pretty functional, just it's definitely not perfect, but it responds for the most part naturally to your commands. In this game there are art combos and setups which the AI naturally responds to. An example is if you inflict break, which is a status which enables you to topple an enemy. If your ally has a topple art, then they can inflict it. Then if one has a daze art, then they can also inflict daze themselves. And it just gets followed up naturally. It takes a while to get used to it, but once you master it, it will really feel like you're part of a team, trying to defeat monsters. The fact that you're mostly in open fields really helps, especially fighting mostly large enemies. The combat really shines in those occasions. The gameplay definitely takes a hit when it's located in like closed corridors, which makes it more restrictive, and when fighting against humanoid enemies, which is far less immersive since they don't seem to respawn naturally. I mean, they're like your size and you're doing these crazy slashes and they just stand there. Now, let's just go to the most important mechanic, which is tension. Tension is a skill-oriented mechanic. That basically means the worse your character does in battle, the worse you will do in battle, right? The best you use your character in battle, the stronger they will be. This is a really good mechanic that prevents players from not trying and just autopiloting through. It encourages you to keep combos going, not letting your teammates die. It rewards you if you succeed. Not only that, the portraits of the characters, they're in the UI, will show you how you're doing. So you can just look at them and like, oh, they're depressed, so I'm doing pretty shitty. I have to, get better at this. Oh, look, I'm doing really good, so maybe I can use this art. There are 3 types of damage in arts, right? Physical, that is self-explanatory, the most common, and it's usually reflected in red arts. It can easily be countered by high defenses and agility. With physical, if you want to fight higher level enemies with physical arts, you're gonna need specific gems, some nocturne, some night gems to be able to do it. Night vision gems to be specific. Ether, which actually bypasses the agility gap and hits target regardless of it. It can be countered by high HP and healing, since it doesn't really tend to be used in succession unless you're Melia, to be honest. Which are the signature move per se of not just a party member, even the enemies. And it's usually linked to either ether or physical, so it really depends on the art. Not all talent arts are damaging. My favorite is Dumbans, I will say that, and yes, they're countered by Monado Shield, if you didn't know. Inflict stat, or you can topple or slip, which also works with the previous ones, okay? Now, visions. Visions are basically the embodiment of Xenoblade's gameplay, and I think it's part of the reason why the game is so good, because it reflects the entirety of it. One of the things that I really like about Xenoblade is that it creates this harmony. Just this balance between gameplay and storytelling, gameplay and story, right? The segregation between gameplay and story is very minimal most of the time, and visions are the best example of this. You get a vision whenever an enemy is about to deliver a really powerful blow. How can you counter it? Well, basically the previous ways that I counter it depend on the vision. It will show you the color of the arts and what they will do to you, so you just act accordingly. Inflict slip. Use Monado Shield. Any of the Monado arts honestly the Monado is the auto weapon to counter visions, but all the other party members have some counter of their own. Not all of them, unfortunately, and I do have to criticize the game for that, but it's definitely something that keeps the game engaging. And when you break a vision, the party just goes crazy because they just change the future. They seize their destiny, I guess. Now, speaking of such, the segregation between gameplay and story. One interesting, I wouldn't say it's mechanic, but a really neat aspect of the game is that it has actual unwinnable bosses battles. I think this is really good and it really works for the game. It makes the villains come up as threatening and it gives you a chance to sort of learn their moveset. Sometimes your objective is not even to beat them, it's to just maybe learn how to topple, learn how to counter their, their playstyle and such, so you can adapt. And then when you finally get to fight them, then it becomes much more satisfying that you finally get the chance to beat them. Unfortunately, the sequels couldn't follow up on this, and they just have you win on the game and lose on the cutscene. Now, I talk a lot about teamwork, but it wouldn't be complete if I don't talk about the signature move, the final smash, which is chain attacks. Now, at mere sight, this system just seems like it's briefly stopping time, just so you can do a simple 3-hit combo. And yeah, at the beginning it can be used that way. But I will say this, first of all, if you get hit by a really strong hit before you do the chain attack, like right before, you can sometimes survive that hit at 1 HP, which is actually really intense when you do that. So you better make those 3 turns if you're really sure you're gonna only get 3 arts, worth it. Just make them worth it. But if you have high affinity, depending on the situation, and also you unlock that skill from Shulk, you're gonna get something called a chain link, which is basically one more chance on the chain attack. And the chain attack, the arts stack up depending on the color. The talent arts can basically become neutral and they can translate from that color. So for example, if you did a physical art with red and then the next party member did a physical art with red and then the third one uses a talent art, then it can translate onto another one. It can be ether, it can be support, and it will stack up with the multiplier. And it just gets really intense when you finally decide to go from those multipliers, when you go from topple locking to just like straight up damage, when you get like a max Blossom Dance, it's just really hype. So yes, at first it's gonna be a little annoying that it can be a bit luck dependent, and it does feel volatile, of course, I'm not gonna lie to you, but it definitely feels like you have some sort of saying. Just don't be afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to expect it, like just say, you know what, I'm gonna do like 6 hits even though I have a low affinity. I mean, you don't really lose anything trying. This game is not gonna punish you. I mean, you may die, but it's just a game, and if you try it, you're gonna have a lot of fun, trust me. By no punishment, I mean that the game doesn't really penalize you for dying over and over. There's no game over. You don't go back to your last save point. Nothing. There's none of that in Xenoblade. You simply go that last landmark, as I said previously. So just feel free to fall as much as you want, die as much as you want. It's gonna be fine. You can try over and over. I also just want to clarify that this doesn't mean that Xenoblade is a very easy game. It has a pretty respectable difficulty, which is why I don't understand the implementation of a casual mode in Definitive Edition, but okay. Regardless, I think the game in general found a really good difficulty that forces you to change your strategy over and over. And the only problem with it is that when doing side quests, like too many of them, you can definitely mess with the pace of the game. Which is really the only real problem that I have in regards of difficulty. I also want to mention that bench party members gain level ups as well as every party member that you meet, it will be around the level range that you are, so you won't have to do some extra grinding for them. I don't know why the following game couldn't follow up with this, but okay, that's for another day. Now, to accompany the excellent combat and gameplay and the world, there is the music. And the music is pretty damn excellent. I'm pretty sure everybody who loves this game also loves the soundtrack and talks about it consistently. The soundtrack just lends itself to so many things for combat, bosses, unique monsters, specific areas, even cutscenes, whether sad, fun, tragic, epic, anything. This soundtrack offers just about anything, and every time you play it and replay it over and over, you'll probably find another track that you didn't know it was there, and you realize that you also like it. I can think of very few tracks. I don't really believe I dislike any of them. I just prefer to listen to some more than others. There's a reason the soundtrack is part of the game's identity. I mean, it is an immense soundtrack with lots of tracks. And these are people who put everything into it, and they didn't even know if this game was going to be successful or not. And in a way, it wasn't, but it eventually paid off, needless to say. Also, I just want to mention that on the 3DS version, you can actually unlock the tracks of the whole soundtrack. And that's pretty cool. We also got official names for many of the tracks, like the Sansa theme turned out to be Sansa the Divine. Unfinished Battle turned out to be Unfinished Business. Close enough, I guess. A really nice detail. Yes, I don't see anybody using this as an MP3, but hey, you do you. It's just there, and I believe it's a really nice touch. Alright guys, so that's gonna be it for today. Look forward for part 2 or whatever. Xenoblade is such a large game with a lot of content and a lot to say about it. And there's just so many things to talk about it that, trying to get into detail, but also trying to find a balance to keep it simple and, concise, it's hard. So I figured that, this was the best course of action. Because of course there's still a lot of things to talk about, the characters, the story, the voice acting, affinity, many things that they feel key to the series, right? But there's so many things that are just key to its success, and it's just really hard to fit them all in one video, and trying to explain why they have an impact. So that's gonna be it for now. Alright guys, see you later.